Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about the Commanders' defense and asking the question, have they done enough defensively to really improve that unit? So give that a read on ESPN.com. I'm going to talk about some of that here, of course, in my 5 things I think. So not a whole lot to say before we get to that. Do obviously just clearly, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the NFL draft is coming to Washington 2027. So there you go. I just covered that. But I think it's a byproduct of what this organization has become under Josh Harris. As the Washington Post reported, this is something they started working on 2 years ago, basically when Harris bought the team, and it came to fruition now. And so it was a natural byproduct of the evolution of this franchise and how the league wants to highlight this city once again. And this is why they've gotten, obviously Goodell gets involved with stadium stuff, et cetera, with other teams. But I do think it's important for this team to be back in the city for the NFL and for this franchise to be highlighted as one that has really kind of turned itself around. This is another way to do that. So anyways, now you know, there you go. So I'm going to get to my 5 things I think, because why not? And oh, by the way, before I do get to that, I do have a couple other things. So I am going to be talking to ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reed. So I'm going to have that out. This should be out Thursday. I have talked to a couple coaches for various players. I had told you I have an interview with Brent Pry from Virginia Tech about Jayden Lane. That'll play next week. Be out at rookie minicamp on Friday. That's the only day we get. So I'll have a little an update just on some first impressions of the rookies, especially the draft class, right? And we're going to get a chance to talk to them. We'll talk to Dan Quinn before the rookies practice. So stay tuned for all that and all that good stuff coming up, because there's a lot to learn about these players, as you well know. And I know you want to learn about them because I do too. Anyway, so that's it. And oh, I did forget this. You gold members, 8 o'clock Thursday night, private Zoom. Join me there. I put it a little bit later, so hopefully maybe a couple more of you guys can join. And, always enjoy it. So come on for that. Anyway, and my little very last thing before I get into this, my little just public service announcement about if you haven't been, talk to your doctor about prostate cancer, please do it. Ask if you can get a PSA test. Please do it. So there you go. Anyway, that's it for me. Now let's get back to football and the 5 things I think. Number 1, I think the quest for defensive end is probably stronger on the outside than it is on the inside of the Commanders building. So it doesn't mean they're not looking to improve anywhere, but I do think they feel much better about that defensive front than perhaps others outside the building do. And, I think they feel like they've improved their pass rush because of the versatility. Guys like Dietrich Wise, who they feel can rush outside or inside. And so just another big guy who you can maybe use as a chess piece a little bit more. Johnny Newton's progression is another thing. Daron Payne, to me, will be a big key in the pass rush this year. He's got to get back to where 11 sacks is asking an awful lot of a defensive tackle. He did get him paid. He wasn't an 11 sack guy before that year. He hasn't been since, but he needs to get in that 6 to 7 sack range, which he hasn't gotten to the last 2 years either. He's got to be more of a threat, and perhaps maybe beefing up this front will allow him and guys like him and Johnny Newton to maybe be more just effective from a 3 technique standpoint, for sure. Javon Kinlaw, I know they're very excited about him. They definitely feel like they have something in him, and that they, listen, man, the word is that they will talk to people and say, like, they know they have a plan for him. And I've told you before, he's going to be playing inside, but they have an idea of how they want to use him in there and maybe unlock more consistency from him. But I can tell you, man, like, they feel pretty good about that signing. And I will say too, like, I don't know what teams were interested in him. When you get a 3-year deal like that, other teams were interested. So anyways, but they feel good there. And I think that what they feel good about is the depth of what they have in that front that will help their pass rush. When you look at their front, I don't think it's certainly not any worse than last year. Dante Fowler had 10.5 sacks, but I wouldn't call him a guy that's just like a guy that the defenses are really keying on to stop. And there were some issues against the run for him as well. So good guy, had a good year, was a help for sure. but I don't think he's a guy that's like, oh, how are you going to replace Dante Fowler? I don't think anybody's saying that. But I think the way you do it, though, is you hope that you have more depth of rushers so that way you're putting guys out. There were times last year they're putting guys out there who are not pass rush threats. Now, Jacob Martin, now these guys, are they major threats? No, but they can rush the passer. They do have those skills to at least threaten. I think that's something that, there's a little bit more depth there. But the whole point of it is, I don't think there's, would they like to get someone if you could? Well, yeah, because I told you, like they did try for DeMarcus Lawrence. They did inquire about Joey Bosa. Obviously Trey Hendrickson, who when it appeared there with the trade discussions were maybe a little bit more serious, just surrounding him, not necessarily just with Washington, but just surrounding him, those seem to have cooled. So I don't think, and it doesn't feel like there's anything really, doesn't sound like there's anything brewing there. But the point is, they did look for other guys. So it's not like they shut off and say, hey, we're good. I don't think they've done that. The question then is what do you do? I do think before I get to one couple ways they can help their pass rush is one, by defending the run better and putting yourself in a better situation to defend the pass. And there may be more obvious passing situations. And I think that's part of what they hope is like what they really did this offseason is gotten bigger on the front and help themselves, they hope, in the back with some additions there. So if you can be better against the run, then you can help yourself rushing the passer. But here's a couple of things, like their pass rush last year was actually pretty solid. They were 11th in the NFL with 43 sacks. In the four-man rush is where they had some problem. They were, let me drop back a minute here. So 11th with 43 sacks. They were ranked 6th in sacks per dropback, 8th in quarterback contact percentage, and 11th in pressure percentage. So those are all really good numbers. And obviously, you'd like to have that guy who's just that guy. So when the Myles Garrett, the Trey Hendricksons, guys that we discussed in the offseason who, maybe really weren't available, but the names were out there, right? So if you had that guy and you get an offense that's explosive, you can put them in situations where that pass rusher can change the game because they're having to drop back more because you're ahead, blah, blah, blah. So that obviously would help to have that guy. But I do think in this case, it's really going to be helpful to stop the run better. They've got to stop the run better for sure. Now, in their four-man rushes, again, with Dante Fowler and his 10.5 sacks, they were 26th in the NFL with 22 sacks. They were 18th in sacks per dropback out of their four-man rush. Now, they were 5th in pressure percentage, so they did okay there, but the production, sacks per dropback and the number of sacks were not there out of their four-man rush. I don't think that's going to change a whole lot. And so here's where else it could be helped. I think the blitzing can be better. And I think, getting Luvu in here for a second year, Bobby Wagner another year, and just obviously Ken Norton knows how to use him. But I think just getting a second year with those guys, but especially Luvu, and then also how do you use those corners, Trey, and then the safeties coming down the box, who's going to be good there for you. So I think there's other ways to do that to generate the pressures through blitzing, which they did last year. The other part of that is with Trey Amos. So getting him to me was really big, especially when you want to pressure the passer. It helps to have guys who can cover. It helps to play man covers because that man, if you can disrupt the timing, you buy that front a little bit more time to get there. If you can disguise coverage, you buy that front a little bit more time to get there. Now you have more mix and match type corners. You have a couple guys who are best on the outside, a couple guys who can go either way, and a couple guys, they're obviously better inside, but guys like Samuel Jones and even Igbenogany can go outside as well, especially Samuel and Jones. So it just gives you a little bit more variety, but also gives you a second corner who can play press man. That's what he does. That's one of the things he does well. And that's one of the reasons why they liked him. And has some length, but it gives you the ability to maybe do some different things defensively in coverage that can buy that front just a little bit more time. This is all in theory. It always sounds great. It always sounds great in May and always sounds better on paper. But that is the theory, right? And I don't think it's not an inaccurate one because Amos can do that. And I've told you before, I'm watching him in college. You see that ability to play off a guy, spin off a guy. And I think he was really good. In fact, here's what Lane Kiffin had to say. I was on a conference call with him couple, last week. This is what he had to say about the guy he coached, Amos, in college.
His work ethic's unbelievable. This isn't just a story. I just passed him walking across the field right here, coming back over here, um, and he's just out there, And it was yesterday. Like he just doesn't change. He just comes up here. He's working out with one other player, and they just grind out there for hours. Unbelievable work ethic, unbelievable culture, player. Um, just wants to be great, and it makes players great around him, and really had a great year for us.
One of the things that they talked about was his ability to play press and maybe help disguise more coverages. What did you see from him just on the field and the kind of impact he can maybe make in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he can do everything. He's got great length, can run, great ball skills. Um, I think he's going to be a really good starting corner in the NFL.
His presence can help him. Now he's got to play. He's got to be able to handle it right away, right? So there's no doubt that there's going to be a transition for him. Can he do it? We don't know yet. We don't know what he's capable of to come right in and do. I do think as he progresses, he will be good for them. And again, it's the ability and sometimes it also could be that you don't have to move Marshawn Lattimore around all the time if and when Amos gets up to speed, right? Like early on, you're not going to put him on, the AJ Browns all the time, but can you do that sometimes? Is he capable of that right away? It then gives you maybe ability to do some different things with coverage because you don't have to always move Marshawn Lattimore with him. And then again, some of this depends on Lattimore being healthy. If he's healthy, if he's back to himself, then you have a guy that can also do things on the other side. And it gives you that ability to play certain types of pressures and maybe send more five-man rushes because you have guys who can hold up in coverage just a little bit better. They're going to have to do that, folks. So anyways, so the point is there's ways to improve or to have the same kind of pass rush as had last year. Again, the pass rush wasn't the issue last year. The run defense was. Like they were horrendous there. And if that doesn't improve, I mean, look at the Eagles. The Eagles had 3 games with more than 200 yards rushing against them. Every game they had that. You needed to get a lot better there. And so that's now I'm not even promising that they are, but that's where they attacked for sure. And again, they got some depth of pass rushers. There are other defensive ends available, edge rushers available. We know that, right? Now, I'm not expecting anything imminent here. I don't, I've called around on some. The guys that I know, Preston Smith, there hasn't really been anything there. Matthew Judon, no contact. So that, if you're looking at guys who are of that, guys who can come in and give you maybe that 6 to 8 sacks or whatever, it's Zadarius Smith and Von Miller. And I told you there are some people they talked to up in, who are familiar with Miller up in Buffalo. They didn't sound all that wowed by what he still had. But then I talked to another coach who very familiar with him, coached him, played against him, and feels like he still shows some flashes that maybe he could help a team as a situational guy. So we'll see. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know that anything's going to happen. It could very well be that if something does, you want to get through your spring practices, you get to the summer camp and see what do you really need, and then also other teams are going to be doing the same thing. Would someone else become available that maybe could help you as a situational guy? You're not going to get an all-pro coming off the street here anytime soon, right? Guys are available for a reason. And even Zadarius Smith and Von Miller, they come with bigger names. They do not have those games that were that of a couple years ago. So you have to keep things in check and have the proper perspective and realistic expectations if they did go that direction. Anyways, so that's all well and good, but that leads me to my number 2 part, which again is Trey Amos. So I think he's a guy again. He gives you multiple outside press corners. And I think the ability to disguise is going to be crucial for them. I felt like a couple of years ago with Ron Rivera, they had the one year where I felt like they did a really good job disguising, and you could see the difference it makes in the defense. They actually had a good defense that year. It was the every other year type thing, and that year they happened to be better. But this disguises were a lot of it. I saw Tom Brady get thrown off by some of those, and if you can do that, then it certainly reduces the need, or gives you the pressure more time to get home. It can also lead to more turnovers, and that's the other part of their defense that more so than just the pass rush, it's the ability to take the ball away. You need guys who can help you do that, and if you can disguise better, if you can have a guy who, and again, what is what I watched with Amos in college, the ability to peel off in a zone situation and come back up, or fool the quarterback into thinking he's dropping into zone coverage, maybe it's a match, whatever. He's coming off there, and then he's going to make a play on the ball. You saw that multiple times, one time with a pick, a couple times with breakups, but that's a way you can help that for sure. But I think that's why for me, I'd be as excited about Amos as anybody because I do think he can make an impact if he goes out there and plays. And I want to get more intel on him. And I told you I just played the clip from Lane Kiffin. Let's play another one right here about what else he has to say about Trey Amos.
And he just had great length and great ball skills, and people didn't throw at him very much, or else he would have even had that much of a bigger year.
But the two things Quinn always talks about is affecting the passer and then also taking the ball away. And so I think because of some of these additions, I think you can still affect the passer at the same rate you did. Again, even though that Fowler had the good numbers, I don't think teams were sitting there just scared about how they were going to defend him. They don't have that guy this year either. And I do think like John Allen was, losing him inside or letting him go, or getting rid of him inside. We'll see how they replace him there. But again, Payne has to have a good year and Johnny Newton has to have a good year. But I think with the depth of rotation, you're going to have a stronger rotation and that can help there too. So anyways, there you go. Number three, Bob Myers. I think he had some interesting quotes on Steph Curry and Jayden Daniels. And I'm going to read this to you too. He was on XM Sirius radio, NBA radio. And of course, he's going to talk about the NBA. That's his expertise. But his expertise is also knowing he played certainly a crucial role here in helping build this front office and hiring Dan Quinn. He knows superstars, and he had one in Steph Curry. He was around him all the time. And so he was asked about similarities between Jayden Daniels and Steph Curry. And I'm going to read you the quote. Bob Myers said, here's a common thread. For most NBA players, NFL, I know NBA better than the NFL. They're insecure. And I don't say that in a bad way, meaning like they have a bad game, they question themselves, they maybe go on a bad streak, or they question their ability. Steph Curry is the most authentically confident player I've ever been around. Legit belief in his ability, doesn't waver, and that is so rare. Jayden has this like quiet belief, and when you have that, that's so powerful. So then he also went on to say, he talks a lot about Steph Curry because that's his area of expertise, of course. And he talked about Curry having a game in the playoffs where he's 0 for 10 from three, scores 17 points in overtime of a playoff game after missing his first 10 threes. I mean, most players are 0 for 10 from three. It's over, like they're done for the game. And even their teammates are like, bro, it's not your night, stop jacking shots. Steph, you look in his eyes and he's just like, what? It's no problem. I'll make my next. That is so hard to find. And I see some of that in Jayden. Obviously, he doesn't have the career. He's got a long way to go. But that's the part where you look at guys like that. And when you play with guys like that, you always believe you have a chance. If you're in a huddle with Curry or with this guy, meaning Jayden, and Jayden showed some of it last year, you look at that guy and you go, he's going to get us there. That's what, so I think you probably knew that, right? But I think it's interesting to hear it from a guy like Myers, who has been around Jayden Daniels, but also around a guy like Steph Curry. Like there's just guys who are just different. I think the other thing too that I think you can, with Jayden is he quickly became the face of the franchise, right? But he's not somebody who, and I've talked about this before, who has to command all the attention. And I think it's funny because you watch him like go into the Caps games with his teammates. He likes being one of the guys. He does not need, like you're watching Sam Hartman and Frankie Louvu at the Caps games chugging beers. And I guarantee you, Jayden was egging Hartman on. I guarantee that. But he doesn't have to have the attention on. He doesn't have to be on the Jumbotron doing all these things and having the attention on him. It's not, I think that's one of the reasons why teammates like him so much is because it's not all about him. Like he knows who he is, but I don't think he still realizes the impact he's had on the area, which I think is a good thing because I don't think he sits there and thinks about it. But I think that's one of the things that's rare also about an athlete. And I mean, I've heard, you hear NBA guys talking about some of the superstars on their team, to continue this analogy. And even a guy like they were talking about Donovan Mitchell with the Cavs and how normal he is. And that's one of the things that jumped out to people who joined the team. I think it goes a long way when you have guys like that. It fosters a different sort of camaraderie in the locker room. I think that's something that Jayden Daniels does as well. But again, like it really goes back though to what Myers is talking about, is just confidence. And that's why players or coaches will say he comes off the field and he's like, after the Eagles game where they beat them at home, he throws a pick late and he came off. He's like, we're gonna still go down and score and win the game, right? So there's just a belief, and he's always had that. It's why he comes off the field okay. Like nobody wants to turn it over, but it doesn't destroy him. He just bounces back. Why? Because he always thinks he will. That is rare, and that's why that kid is going to be good. That young man is going to be good for a long, long time. All right, let's get to RFK. I do think that deal is ultimately going to get done. How I do expect the council to eventually approve it. However, the question is when, right? This could take a minute, right? Because they don't even have, my understanding is they don't even have the mayor's budget yet. And typically by this point in the year, they've already had it, and maybe I've already had it for several weeks or a month, right? So that's why when you hear this July 15th deadline, could it be done by then? Sure. But I think there's also a definite chance that it would be pushed beyond. The council goes on recess and they would have to take it up after in the fall, and that it could take a little bit longer to get that approved, depending on how. I mean, this is all speculation because they don't even have, they've seen the terms, they've seen the proposal, but they don't have the mayor's budget. So they can't start going over all that stuff until they do. So that July 15th deadline, the longer it takes to get it there, the harder it might be to get that done by that timetable. So it's not a process that I think they want to speed through. But I would say this, even people who have some big problems with it ultimately expect this to get approved. So it's just a matter of probably when, and then what do you have to give up in the meantime? And I think that's going to be the interesting part. And it's funny because like part of me says like, well, what's the alternative at that site? If you don't do this deal, what's the alternative? Is there an alternative? Well, the answer is no. And that's one of the things that some other members would say, like, yeah, there isn't anything, and you want this anchor in there that someone else is willing to pay for. That's the key. Like, if you want to develop this as a city, this is the cost. And is there a way, could you do it for $1 billion? That's what the city's going to put in this and maybe make more. I don't know. I'm not that smart, but I do know like it's 179 acres, right? Like that's a lot of room. So what's the investment, and how much would be outside private investment? Could you get something like this? And then, as others have said, there have been projects in DC that they start talking about them, and 20 years later, they're finally getting started. Do you think Congress is going to be happy if they if they lease this land back to them for 99 years and then they don't do anything for 20? Like that's not going to go over well. So I think they're very cognizant of that. But as someone else said, like what they wanted, what some certainly would want, is they would have preferred to open it up to other proposals just to see what is best for the city. Because even in the bill from Comer and Bowser, even in the bill from the House, like it didn't say, or from Congress, it doesn't say that they have to build a stadium. It just says it allows for a stadium to be built. So kind of an important distinction. So I think there's some like, why does it have to be a stadium? Is that the best usage? And can they really have it full a couple hundred nights out of the year, which is what the Commanders say they would want? Realistically, I think it's going to, they know it might be hard to do that, because how many concerts can you have in there? What kind of things can you do to attract that many events? That's one thing. These are all questions that are going to get answered over time, right? I think the other thing that will be an issue is parking and the number of parking spaces, and they're going to have these garages. I think the proposal apparently says that they'd have 13 of those. I don't think that's exactly the kind of aesthetics they want around there, but I don't, again, this is stuff that they're going to have to hammer out. There are little things that could be done. Perhaps, listen, the team has its business headquarters in Maryland. The team will practice and stay in Virginia and practice there. And by the way, they're doing a lot of renovations out there, and it's going to, they've really put an emphasis on improving that facility for the players. It's always going to be a smaller one, but they are finding creative ways to make room, tearing down some rooms, updating rooms. Like for example, the receivers last year, their meeting room was in the auditorium. Well, they converted an old studio into a really nice room for the receivers. So, anyways, I got sidetracked there, but I did want to mention that. But the business headquarters are in College Park. So is that something where if some of these board members like, why don't you just move this 125 people into the city? That could be something that's an easy like, all right, we can do that, right? And those little things like that. I don't know if that'll happen, but I do think that'll certainly be. I'm gonna guess that'll be asked about for sure. So, but bottom line is a lot of optimism around this. Again, based on the conversation I've had with a number of people, and there's also the part about the $1 billion shortfall for DC. When I've talked to some people, they like this doesn't it's that affects this summer more than anything, so it doesn't necessarily affect this project. So I don't think that you need to worry about that angle, at least according to a few people. And I'm going to continue to ask people. I continue to talk to people about this just to keep myself informed, to keep you informed, whatever. That's my job, right? It's a reporter. But I do think that that is something to keep in mind, and like how they what the budgets are in the future that could maybe affect it. It's also coming from a different budget. There you go. Anyways, optimism. There will be work to be done, and it could take a minute. So there you go. Finally, I think it's going to be, I think I always enjoy going out to rookie minicamp to get that first impression. I do think, and by the way, it starts Friday and they'll be practicing, this weekend. We get a chance to watch them on Friday. We'll get to watch maybe about an hour or so. We'll talk to Dan Quinn beforehand. And, there's obviously going to be a few things to talk to him about, but it's our first chance to see the rookies. And I always like that because I always like to see how they move. It's going to be difficult to really get a good feel for a lot of these rookies. Josh Connolly, you're not, you'll get his chance you'll see and feel his size because we'll talk to him afterwards, right? So that's something. But are you getting, you can watch how he moves on the field, how fluid is he, et cetera. But you're not going to watch him against an NFL pass rusher yet. So that's going to be hard to measure. Trey Amos, you'll get a chance to see him move, and you'll hopefully watch him against a guy like Jayden Lane, get a guy that's going to be on the roster, right? And to see how does he look against him. It'll be fun to watch, Keim Medrano, how he runs, Ja'Cory, how he looks running the ball or catching the ball, whatever. So you can watch some of these guys and learn some things, but it's only an hour. So I always get questions about, well, how did this one undrafted guy look? Well, it's hard to tell how all the draft picks looked, let alone some of the undrafted. So that's going to be interesting, but it is fun to see that. Like, for example, you do learn to some things and you pick up on things for sure. And I'll go back to last year with Jayden Daniels. Like, you watching him on the field, the special talent that he has. But what always jumped out to me more, first of all, he wasn't, his passes were very accurate and you didn't really see passes hitting the ground. Now, a lot of times you shouldn't in these situations, but you do. And you didn't with him, right? So while it's noteworthy, is it the most important thing? No, but it's something you notice. But to me, what really stood out was how when you'd ask the other rookies about him, what their responses were and how much they gravitated to him. And he's a guy that it just comes natural. And so, but that to me, that's why it stood out to me is like, he's not a get in your face, come with me, I'm going to do this. He's not, it's more just people want to gravitate to him. And it's funny because I had this conversation with Zach Ertz and he told me how he reminded him of Andrew Luck. And I'm thinking, is it the talent? Is it this, that? He goes, some of is for sure some of that, but a lot of it too was guys just gravitate to them. And it's like, it's hard to explain, but they do. And that's what stood out to me about Jayden. All the other stuff that you saw is stuff we saw throughout the year, but it's what you heard was always the number one reason why I felt like he would be really good. And it started at that rookie minicamp. And then you see little things like Sam Hartman, right? I'm in there in the practice bubble where, just doing work for a couple hours later and a couple hours after the practice ends, here comes Sam Hartman to the bubble, probably thinking nobody's in there. There's a couple of us in there, but he's just going over plays, right? Just his own personal walkthrough just to get more comfortable. And it's like, those are the things you pick up on. You see how guys work or who does what, right? And I think that's to me always interesting. And I'll even go back to 2012 with Robert. Like you could see that ball came out of the ball sounded different when it was when you're standing by the sideline. It's just because he had a lot of zip on that ball and it just felt different, right? And that, but you see that you could see the athleticism, you could see the talent, and it's like to see it up close, like, yeah, this could be pretty fun this year. So those are things. So you do learn things, but you also have to kind of like there's sometimes you're like, okay, you see this, but what does it mean? Is this guy what you don't want to overreact to things, but you just want to pick up first impressions and then build on that. Okay, it looks like this here. How's it going to look in a couple weeks when they start practicing against the veterans? Our first OTA that we're going to watch is May 28th. So anyway, that's there you go. But anyway, I'm looking forward to it for that reason because I do think you can learn some things and you see other things and Gabe Taylor's going to be there too. Obviously, the younger brother of Sean Taylor, and he's a tryout guy. We'll see what happens. He does have some ability. He's tough. He's not big. He's listed at like just under 5'9", just under 190 pounds, but he plays tough and he plays with some violence and so guys like that tend to scrap and fight and find their way into a camp at some point. Whether it's here or not, I don't know. But he does have I checked his 40 times like 4.55, so it's not terrible by any means, but he's quick. So I think like he has some traits like, okay, could he end up in somebody's camp? I think eventually I would think he does because he had some productivity. I also like that he stayed at Rice for 4 years and it sounds like he could have left to go somewhere else, but he chose not to. He chose to stay loyal. I think that says a lot about him. Doesn't say anything bad the other way. I think it says something good about him this way. But anyway, he'll be there. We'll get a chance to talk to him afterwards because the PR staff knows that people are going to want to talk to him because of his ties. And so, but I'll fill you in on what he did or said and all that good stuff. Anyways, that's it from me, folks. Appreciate you tuning in as always. And you gold members, Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And I will have Jordan Reed on Thursday talking about the Commanders draft, what he thought about each of the 5 picks. So talk to you next time.